everyone, and welcome to Season 13, Episode 33 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Wednesday, the 4th of November, and I'm here with my good friends Martin and Mark. Hello, Martin.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you, Mark?
I'm not too bad, thanks.
Super. And on this week's episode of the Ubuntu Podcast, we're going to do community news, lots of, a little bit of tech news and stuff, maybe events, probably not, lockdown and all that. And then maybe some more things. I don't know. I haven't read the notes. Does it show?
A professional as always.
Mark? Oh, of course. We don't even talk over each other or anything. Mark, what have you been up to?
I have been hacking my Steam controller.
Ooh.
Last show, I mentioned that I was thinking about different controllers for my Nintendo Switch, and that I had read hints that it might be possible to use a Steam controller with one. Well, I looked into it a bit more, and it's not only possible, it's actually quite easy.
Isn't it just a Bluetooth device? I think I asked you this at the time. Isn't it just a Bluetooth device?
It is. I mean, you can use it as a Bluetooth device, but it doesn't work with the Switch as a Bluetooth controller.
What does the firmware do to it to make it work?
So the firmware basically pretends to be another third-party USB controller, and you plug it in over the USB cable, and it says, oh, hello, you've got a USB controller plugged in.
So it only works as a wired controller?
It does, which is unfortunate. However, I do happen to have an extremely long USB cable left over from a previous project, so it's not actually a problem for me. But yeah, basically, there's the microcontroller in the controller. There's a guy who's been playing around with a dev board with that microcontroller and managed to reverse engineer enough of what's needed for a Switch controller and enough of how the Steam controller's original firmware works to be able to write new firmware for that chip. And then you actually you plug it into your computer and hold the right trigger, and it appears as a USB device, and there's a file called firmware.bin.
Okay.
And then you just blat the new file onto there and it works. But yeah, because that dev board doesn't contain the Bluetooth chip, he's not been able to get Bluetooth working with it, but it works perfectly well over USB.
Nice.
Okay. So this is clearly a community effort. This is not an officially sanctioned. Right. Okay. And can you flip-flop between firmware editions, if that's the right term?
So you can back up, well, you absolutely should back up the original Valve firmware from the controller. And then, basically you can write the custom firmware on, and there's a couple of different versions depending on what you're planning on doing with it. And then you can write the backup back to it. And there's also instructions for how, if you completely brick the whole thing, how to get the original firmware from Valve and restore it back to a working state. It is, on Linux at least, it's it's about 3 or 4 steps, but it's some DD commands, which isn't terribly friendly. So it'd be nice if someone wrote a little GUI to do it for you, considering that the actual process is, it's quite straightforward.
Nice.
That's interesting. I managed to not completely brick, but sort of break one of my Steam controllers. I put there's an option in Steam Big Picture to say put the Bluetooth firmware on, which I did. And after doing that, it was only possible to use that Steam controller when it was plugged in over a cable. It wouldn't speak to its dongle or Bluetooth anymore. So it's obviously in a bit of a bad way, but if there's recovery instructions somewhere, maybe I should give that a go.
I think you just boot it with holding down one of the A, B, X, Y buttons and the Steam controller to reset it.
I have tried that. I did find those instructions, and that did not help. So maybe these, DD recovery commands might be a way to sort of force it back into life.
Yeah. One thing that I decided I'd do as a result of having got this working is I'm going to buy a second-hand Steam controller to have permanently in Nintendo Switch mode. Because it turns out that if you're not bothered about it having a box or the receiver, which for this purpose I'm not at all, you can actually pick up a second-hand one quite cheaply.
Yeah, I got one in CEX, so not super cheap. So I've got 4 of them now. In fact, I will mention next time, I will remember to mention what I've been doing with my Steam controller, because it's fun. Also, what about you, Martin? What have you been up to?
I have been making an extremely fast home directory.
Oh, a fast one.
Very, very, very fast.
Not spinning Rust, then?
Not spinning Rust, no. So I mentioned recently that I'd upgraded my computer to a Threadripper system.
You might have mentioned
I
it.
may have mentioned that. And that means that I've got access to PCI Gen 4 speed PCI ports and M.2 slots. And included with my new motherboard was an add-in card, which is a 16-lane PCI card that you can put 4 NVMe drives into, and then dedicate 4 lanes to each of those drives. So I have got 4 2 terabyte Gen 4 NVMe drives in this thing, and then created a RAID 0 stripe to create an 8 terabyte storage device, which is now my home directory.
And what are you doing with this incredibly fast home directory?
Well, a few things. So I'm not using all of it for my home directory. Some of it I've got mounted to places where VMs and containers live, because when I'm composing snaps, they're usually quite big. And the other thing that Threadripper is really good at is compression and decompression, and snaps are compressed. So having a suitably fast processor and really fast storage means I can build snaps really fast. And also, we'll discuss a bit later, there are other images that I work on regularly, and in order to iterate on those, I need to make multi-gigabyte compressed images on the regular, and now I've got a processor that can do that very well, and then very fast storage to actually make that compression and decompression step very, very quick.
I can't help but think every time I see one of your photos of a PCI card with, storage in it of some kind, I can't help but remember the Amstrad PC 1512 with a hard drive on a card that went in the back of it.
Right.
I don't know why.
It's not
storage
dissimilar.
on a card. It just looks weird and it's strange. I know there shouldn't be anything strange. It's just like storage devices attached over a bus.
Right.
There's nothing weird about it, but it just, when it's storage and it's not in a drive bay, but it's on a card, it just is weird to my head.
I mean, for us, for our generation, that was how you added storage into sort of, the 8 and 16-bit era, was you just plugged a thing in somewhere and, disk appeared or storage appeared. Yeah. Anyway, it's only a single slot card, but it's heavier than my very big GPU because it is just a great big copper plate. It's super heavy. It's the densest thing I've ever picked up, I think.
Awesome. Okay, right. Let's get on with the show. And first up, we have some community news. And the first item in the community news is the new community council has been elected. The CC is dead. Long live the CC. I think we talked about this a little while ago, where we talked about how it kind of atrophied a little bit, the community council. And WXL, Walter, in the community helped reboot the community council, started the process for nominating, and the community voted for who they wanted to be on the CC, and a selection of people, including Walter, Lena, Thomas, Jose, Nathan, Torsten, and Eric, were voted in to the Ubuntu Community Council. So good luck to them.
Yes, and congratulations.
In their super new roles. Yes.
And they've wasted no time bursting into activity, because they have put out the requests for people who want to stand on the local community team councils or council. So the locos are local communities, and these are Ubuntu community groups that are distributed all over the world and have sort of focused geographical interest, I think is sort of the point, right?
Yeah, a lot of them were born out of the translation teams. So they were, focused around a particular country, but also focused around a language. And they did a lot of the people in those teams did a lot of the translations. But as well as that, they do, advocacy and support and, community stuff.
Sort of like a Linux user group, but Ubuntu focused.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as the Ubuntu UK Loco came along, and I started talking to friends on that, some of which I've known through Linux user groups, I basically stopped using the local Linux user group. Feel bad. not that bad. Sorry, not sorry. But the local community council is a group of people who help invigorate those local community teams and, solve problems that the loco teams have. And I think as well as the CC atrophying, the loco council did. And I think this is another opportunity to reboot the loco council in order to get those local community teams rebooted as well.
And also a new Ubuntu membership board is sought. So the existing members of the Ubuntu membership board who decide who gets to be an Ubuntu member, their terms of office are all coming to an end, and they're looking for new members.
Well, this is new members of the membership board. Oh God, it sounds very
new
bureaucratic.
Ubuntu members to be members of the membership board.
Yes.
To bring in more members.
Yes.
And then those members can run for the community council.
Yes, later. Yes. So the goal of this is that people who have contributed in some significant or sustained way to Ubuntu, and that doesn't necessarily mean development. It could be, advocacy, translations, artwork. Maybe they do a podcast. Who knows? And those people can apply to be Ubuntu members. And you get an @ubuntu.com email address, and you get a few other little perks. I think we still get a Linux Weekly News free subscription. I still use mine all the time when I'm doing research for this show. And there's a few other bits and bobs and discounts on various things as benefits to being an Ubuntu member, having contributed for a while.
Access to the executive washroom.
And the ability to vote on see previous news article to vote on the community council. So yes, it's pretty straightforward. If you're an existing Ubuntu member, in fact, I've been on the membership board, the loco council, and the CC at some point in the past. And the membership board it's really rewarding because you have a meeting like twice a month, and people turn up and show what they've done and say, I'd like to be an Ubuntu member, and you get to just look through their wiki page and go and rummage around in what they've done in the forums and have a look at what code they've contributed. And sometimes you have to dig a bit because people contribute in lots of diverse ways. It's not just code. But sometimes it's just blindingly obvious and punching you in the face, and you recognize the name and you recognize their contributions. And it's like, oh my gosh, why is this person not a member already? And so it's really quite a rewarding but not super time-consuming task to do as a member.
I was a bit tardy in applying. I think it took me 2 years before I actually came round to applying, but Mark's got me beat by a good 6 or 7 years there, I think.
All right, I'll get on that.
I remember my meeting on IRC. It'll be in an IRC log somewhere online where, you have to paste in a little summary about yourself and stuff. It can be quite daunting. And I know people who go for their Ubuntu membership can feel quite stressed at doing it. But, it's just a chat with a bunch of, nicknames on IRC really. But, it can be a little bit stressful. Anyway, moving on. 2104 has a new code name. So the adjective animal thing carries on. This time it's a hirsute hippo. I don't know who came up with that, but I really like the word hirsute. I don't know why. A hirsute hippo.
I've heard that it's a bit divisive, that one, and some people are rejecting the hirsute for a more straightforward alternative.
Hairy.
Yeah.
The hairy hippo.
Why don't people like hirsute? I just hirsute. It just makes me think of Family Guy.
I've heard some of the developers complaining, it's a Noric all over again. I'm going to misspell this for the next 6 months.
There is that. I mean, it's a learning exercise, isn't it? I will never forget how to spell jackalope now. I don't think I'd ever typed that word before Jaunty released.
I think it's funny. Occasionally, not so much now, but when my daughter was younger, you end up playing the animal alphabet game. And I can remember other parents looking on, just amazed that every letter I had an animal.
Brilliant. Jackalope, not technically an animal.
No.
So, what's next, Martin?
Well, the Chelsea Cucumber edition of Ubuntu has released images for the Raspberry Pi. So Ubuntu MATE 20.04.1 and also 20.10 are now available for download for the Raspberry Pi on the Ubuntu MATE website.
So, why are these so late, Martin?
It was sort of deliberate. So I don't know if you know this, but I may have had a hand in working on the Ubuntu images for the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, it's kind of your job, isn't it?
Yes, kind of my job. And as the, and I've been working on like bringing Ubuntu desktops to the Raspberry Pi for 5 years or so. But with this release, Ubuntu having its first official desktop release, I decided just to delay things by a week before Ubuntu MATE outed with its new stuff, and also had the happy side effect of don't know if you know this, but there are talented engineers that work at Canonical, a lot more talented than me.
I did know that, yes.
So they looked at my prototypes and then they made it better, much better.
Excellent.
So these images sort of roll up all of the good work that Ian Lane and Dmitry Ledkov and Dave Jones have, done to tidy up my mess.
Is this something that will spread to other flavours, perhaps? Do any of the other flavours have an interest in making Pi flavour images for their flavours?
I have heard from some of the flavour leads that they're interested, and what I will be working on with Rhys Davis, who is the product manager for Ubuntu Desktop and Raspberry Pi at Canonical, are some instructions for official flavors to add the Raspberry Pi as an official release architecture should they want to do it. So that will be coming up in, I don't know, the next month or so. It's fairly complicated stuff, but we're going to try and break that down in a way that means something to flavor maintainers.
Nice. Anyway, never mind that software. Mark, there's some other good software out there, isn't there?
Yes. Trisquel GNU/Linux version 9.0 has been released. So this is a completely free software Linux distribution, GNU Linux distribution. That means exclusion of binary-only firmware for wireless cards and graphics cards and so on. The main edition is now based on the MATE desktop. There's also an LXDE-based version called Trisquel Mini, which apparently is very good for netbooks. And there's a version that's based on
netbooks.
That's what they say. It's ideal for netbooks.
Okay.
There is a version called Trisquel Sugar Toast, which is based on the Sugar learning platform, which I think was on the One Laptop Per Child project.
It was.
Many moons ago.
Yeah.
And Trisquel, which uses KDE.
I noticed you heavy emphasis on the K of Trisquel.
You see what they did there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I do, yes.
Yes.
So this is based off Ubuntu, but with non-free things as they see it ripped out.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
This has always intrigued me, Trisquel.
Yeah.
It came to my attention, obviously, because their main edition is based on MATE desktop, and I've always sort of had a little poke around at the distros that use it. But that whole removal of everything that's, proprietary, so your wireless firmware, your GPU firmware for things like AMD GPUs, your NVIDIA proprietary drivers, there's obviously an audience who want, an entirely free software operating system. And I have a ThinkPad X200, which is core boot modified. Mm-hmm. So I have like a free hardware device that I run Trisquel on. So I should be putting this version on.
Mm.
But the other thing I like about Trisquel is it's the only Ubuntu derivative that I'm aware of that entirely hosts their own archive and even rebuilds the source packages for themselves.
Yes. And they've actually got a new development server for doing the rebuilds, which is based entirely on a LibreBoot free hardware platform.
Nice. So It's building free software with free software on a machine that is fully free software.
Yeah.
It's living the dream.
That's fantastic. It is turtles all the way down. The thing I find interesting about Trisquel is in Ubuntu and Ubuntu MATE, there is a button you can press on first boot where you can say install with free software only. And this, I don't know if it is as fully free as Trisquel is, because, you know, there's this, being free software isn't a binary thing. It's, as some people think it is. You know, there's arguments about whether this thing is free or whether it's okay to have this thing, and whether, you know, you're pragmatic or you're, you know, loosening your morals or something by allowing certain things. But I always found Trisquel and GNU Sense super interesting, because they held a very hard line on what was allowed in their archive. And so I find it super interesting that they rebuild everything as well, because that allows them to go through it with a fine tooth comb. I'm pretty sure they don't just import all the source code and build it all. They very carefully pick and choose which packages, because they don't want to taint the whole thing with any non-free software, obviously.
Yes, and clearly this is, you know, an exhaustive task, because Trisquel 9 that has just been announced is based on Ubuntu 18.04.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if they could do with the help. So if you're interested in getting involved in something that's fully free, and, you know, any of us pragmatic types, you know, you're not interested in contributing to, then it seems like Trisquel might be somewhere for you to go. Next up, over on OMG Ubuntu, there's an article about how to control Philips Hue lights on Ubuntu with a GNOME extension. This is amazing.
Martin, you've gone very red. Are you blushing?
I'm just changing my lighting to Spring Blossom.
And I'm turning my lights on and off with a button on my desktop. This is revolutionary.
Wow.
I love this.
So is this connecting directly your Hue lights directly to your desktop, or is there something else in the middle of this that the extension is talking to?
You have a thing called a Hue Bridge, which is a little hockey puck size thing that plugs into your network, and it has whatever the Zigbee radios are that it uses to talk to the lights. And when you have any kind of home automation system, whether that's the Lady Cylinder from Amazon or the one from Google, or any of the free software ones like Home Assistant, they can scan the network and they can interrogate the Hue and find out what devices you've got, all your light bulbs or your doorbells or, you know, switches or whatever they are. And the bridge knows all of that, and they talk to the bridge. And when you install this extension, it has a little settings thing. It's pretty inert until you go to settings, and it finds your Philips Hue Bridge on the network. It scanned my network and just found it immediately. The IP address was in there. And then you press a button, and there's a physical button on the bridge itself, and you just go donk and hit the button on the bridge, and that pairs the two together.
Oh, neat.
So I had to press the button in here and then run downstairs, because it's literally as far away from where I'm sitting right now as it can possibly be. Ran all the way down there, went donk on the button, and then came running back up here, and it was done. And I now get a little menu which lists all the light bulbs in the house, and I can just choose the little menu and just go on, off, on, off, on, off. And it's brilliant.
Yeah, I have to say, it's a simple thing, but my goodness, this is going to be game-changing for me, because when I'm setting up for a live stream, I've now got one of the controls, one of the things I need to set up is just there. It's just click, 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 and it's done. This is great. This feels like, you know, the Linux desktop is, you know, in the current year, as far as I'm concerned now, can do the same thing as my tablet. This is great.
Yeah.
And it even found my custom zones and custom lighting profiles that I've configured as well.
Yeah, it's great. You can change it. There's little like switches where you can drop down, and it shows you a list of all the colors that the light bulb can do. So the one I've got in this room where we are sat, the one I've got in this room where I'm sat has various different things for, like, if you're reading or you want a bright light, or there's an energize which does like very blue light, very bright blue light, and so on. And it just enumerates all of those, and so you can pick and choose. But it saves you having to get your phone out your pocket and do it, and use the app, or shouting at a Home Assistant thing to do it. It's just nice that it's right there on the desktop. I love it.
Yeah.
It's just super. What's next, Martin?
Well, I read with interest that snap speed improvements are abound with new compression algorithms. So our friend and colleague Igor has written an article on the Snapcraft.io blog, and I suspect this is something you know more about than I do, Alan.
So snaps are compressed files. So when you download them from the store, they don't get unpacked to install them. It's not like a zip file. It stays compressed on disk and it gets mounted as a loopback device. You may have seen these in your file manager or by running df or mount or something like that. And they're compressed with XZ compression. And we've had reports from the community that some snaps are sometimes slow to start, especially first launch, and some subsequent launches can be slower than their non-snap counterparts. And we set some engineers in a room and shut the door until they came up with a number of solutions. And one of the solutions has already been done, which was improving caching. Font caching is a real problem. That's a story for another time. And there's a separate blog post about that. And that keeps recurring. That problem keeps biting us. But this one is about the way the snaps are compressed. So I said they're XZ compression. But if we use LZO compression instead of XZ, then they're not as well compressed, but it means they uncompress super fast. And that means at runtime, when you launch the application, the CPU doesn't have so much to do to uncompress all the files. And that makes a marked difference on a large snap with a lot of small files in it. Electron apps are often bulky and have lots of little JavaScript files and lots of little CSS files and images. And so we tested this out on a few applications, and there was a lot of engineering work that had to go. It's not just can't you just compress it differently and you're done? No, because we had to do testing across a whole bunch of architectures to make sure you can do this compression and decompression, because you've got to be able to build the things as well as put them in the store, and the store's got to accept them and be able to decompress them and interrogate them and security check them. And then the people who consume the snap files need to be able to decompress them. So there was a lot of testing involved, and that's now gone live. And so there are a few LZO compressed snaps in the store, which now launch faster.
So is this going to be the future for snaps, or is this an option that a developer can choose? They could either LZO or XZ compress their snaps from now on, depending on their needs.
Yes, it is both. It's not necessarily the case that you always want to use LZO or always want to use XZ. So, for example, a very small snap, it really makes no difference. And so if it's let's say, for example, a snap that contains one binary file, like it doesn't really matter what compression algorithm you use. Whereas something that has like a bazillion tiny files, it really does matter, especially when it's doing a lot of random reads across all those files. So it's a lot more work for the CPU. When the publisher of the snap is building the snap, they can specify to Snapcraft, use LZO, and it will compress using the different algorithm. One of the things people asked us to do was, can't you just recompress them all in the store? And the short answer is no. We don't touch your file. We don't unpack it and then repack it in the store. So by policy. So if you upload an LZO file, we will serve an LZO file. Maybe in the future you could upload multiple copies of your application, and maybe the store could figure out, well, I'm serving this up to this type of device, which is optimally decompressing XZ files, or I'm sending it to a Raspberry Pi, which is better at doing LZO decompression. Maybe there's some intelligence, but at the moment, all it is the publisher chooses and the consumer gets whatever the publisher published.
I feel like this is a very interesting explanation to why I may have wasted my Bitcoin on a very fast storage device that can read at 20 gigabytes per second.
I'm sure there are other, side reasons why you might want faster home directory, but I'm not going to interrogate you on those things, Martin. That's for you to think about. So yeah, we'll link to the blog post. It's quite interesting, and Igor's done a whole load of stats and comparisons so you can see the difference. And we've already had some developers publishing their snaps in using LZO. So that's good. And that's the end of the community news and no events. time for the big news. Martin, what's your big news for this week?
My big news is it's a Raspberry Pi, but it's a keyboard.
What?
The Raspberry Pi 400 has been released by the Raspberry Pi Foundation.
This is neat.
It is. It's cute looking, isn't it?
It's lovely.
Yeah, it's like a very, very small Amiga.
It's exactly like a very small Amiga, and in fact, it's called the Pi 400 as a little hat tip to the wedge-shaped Amiga A500.
I've seen a lot of people like talk about the nostalgic look of this, computer in a keyboard case, and some people comparing it to the Sinclair Spectrum because some people have pointed out that it's not got the world's best keyboard. I think that's a bit harsh.
It's better than a Spectrum.
Other people, I'm not listening, other people suggesting that you could put it inside other cases, like a Commodore 64 size case, if you really want it ugly,
or you want a better keyboard.
And I've seen other people lament the fact that the function keys aren't red like a BBC Micro, to like call back to the the heady days of the BBC Micro. Because I know there were comparisons made to when the original Raspberry Pi came out to the work that the BBC did with the BBC Micro in education environments.
It's interesting that you mentioned education environments, because when I saw this, one of the first things I thought was, this is a computer in a keyboard. It plugs into existing peripherals. I can see it being a really good sell to schools as a replacement for an aging estate of desktops, and as a competitor to Chromebooks as well, because they've already got all of the screens and stuff knocking around from previous purchases in a lot of places. And just to buy a fleet of these and roll them out into a classroom as desktops, and then also have the option to do the more computer sciencey stuff on them as well, is really good.
Yeah, indeed. So the kit, which includes the keyboard and a power supply and a mouse and a micro SD card, an SD card adapter, and even a rather nice beginner's guidebook, that whole kit, that bundle, is $100 or equivalent currency in your region, or you can get the keyboard on its own for $70. So like you say, Mark, if you've got an estate of aging leased PCs, you'll probably have mice knocking around and HDMI monitors and all the rest of it,
but probably not power supplies. You do need that USB-C.
It's a 3 amp power supply, the one that comes with it. And also it's a slight revision on the SoC. So it's clocked at 1.8 gigahertz as opposed to the Raspberry Pi 4's 1.5 gigahertz.
And it's got a heatsink inside it, hasn't it?
Yeah, so even without that, they've actually improved the thermal design of the SoC itself, so it does run cooler, but it does have, if you have ever opened up an old 8-bit computer, like if you've ever opened up a breadbid Commodore 64, you'll see there was an RF shield, which was obviously there to, try and control, RF signals. And it looks like an RF shield if you open one of these up, but it's not. It's a huge heat spreader that goes across the sort of the breadth of the device, which helps dissipate heat and keep the temperatures under control.
And there's also an Ubuntu image for it.
Yes, there is. So Ubuntu is fully supported on the Raspberry Pi 400. So just like the Compute Module 4, there was day one support for Ubuntu on the Pi 400. And if you use the Pi Imager, you'll see an Ubuntu category, including the desktop image and the server images and what have you. And the Green Edition, those new versions that we mentioned earlier, also support the Pi 400 too.
Awesome. Next up, Kim.com can be extradited to the US. I don't know if you're aware of this individual.
I remember him from a few years ago.
Yes. It pops up because he's involved in a criminal case. He lives in New Zealand. He's also known as Kim Schmitz or Kimball or Kim Tim Vim Limbim Sim Biscuit Barrel or something. And he used to run a website called Mega Upload.
Yeah.
And it was a website that had ads on it, and there was a premium subscription model, and it was a file sharing site. And he lives in New Zealand, and some years ago his house got raided by the local plod in New Zealand. And this made big news, and he complained about this bitterly because, who wants their house raided?
Especially when it's a massive luxury mansion with swimming pools and, millions of pounds worth of stuff in it, yes.
There were aerial photos shown of his sprawling, I think the word is, mansion. And I remember him posting about having to hide him and his family in their safe room or whatever you call it. And so he's been fighting extradition to the US because the FBI are after him. Due to him running this mega upload website. And I don't know how to feel about this. He seems like he's trying to be a good guy and trying to claim that there are good legitimate reasons why he was doing this and there needs to be copyright reform, and he's leaning heavily on that kind of thing. But it does feel like, man runs dodgy website. Law enforcement from another country want to have words with you for running dodgy website. Like it's a story as old as the internet, really. I just like keeping tabs on this guy because I'm just glad I'm not him.
Is he a US citizen originally?
I think he's German, half Finnish.
Oh, right. Okay.
But he sounds American because, but yeah, he's often reported as, some kind of hero. I don't know if he sees himself as the kind of, freedom fighter, liberator of information and stuff. But it just feels like those websites were just full of either, dodgy downloads, ISO images and, the usual movie files and stuff like that.
But that's not his fault though, right?
No, he facilitated it though. Okay, a knife can be used for cutting tomatoes as well as stabbing someone, but, I think it's a bit loose. I don't buy it. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finds his way over to the States. He's allowed to appeal this decision by the Supreme Court in New Zealand. We shall check in again in another year when he next goes to court.
Next up, Walmart has sacked its stock checking robots.
Oh no. Have they been furloughed?
No. They are no longer welcome. They have been replaced with their human counterparts.
And why is this?
Well, this was a trial that they had, basically some sort of 6-foot-tall dustbin on wheel shaped robots that roamed around the stores with an array of cameras, basically looking at what's on the shelves and checking, for stock issues. So whether stock was low or needed sorting out or was going out of date or something. The kind of thing that staff do in big supermarkets just as part of their day-to-day work. They thought, well, maybe we could automate this task and then it's something that people won't have to do. But after trialing it, they found actually it's much more efficient just having the staff who are walking around the shop anyway, just have this as part of their duties. And also they weren't completely happy that customers would be comfortable with these robots trundling up the aisle towards them and taking pictures of what's around, and might react badly.
It's interesting how some things it's okay to have a robot replace, and it's okay to have a robot replace the cashier. Well, basically you're replacing the cashier because you become the cashier when you unexpected item in the bagging area, use those machines. But automating other parts of the process are seemingly not welcome. I do wonder if it was the look of these robots. Maybe if they looked a bit different. I look at people post videos on social media of the robots you get in hotels that come and deliver you food and beer, and people seem excited and delighted about a room service robot. And I think it's partly because they're cute. And they come around and interact directly with you. And, you open your hotel room door and, there's a little robot. He's brought me my meal. And the little lid opens up and you take everything and you shut the lid and he scooches off down the corridor. Whereas this thing just looks like a really bad 1960s robot and just bumbles along, but you have no interaction with it. It's not designed to interact with you. It's just designed to look at the stock and get in your way.
Is it a little bit Danger Will Robinson?
It is a bit. It is a bit.
It actually made me think of there's a scene in Caves of Steel by Isaac Asimov where there's some unrest in a shoe shop because someone is being served by a robot, and they believe that it's their right to be served by a human, even though the law says robots are allowed to do the job. I wonder if we're going to, if that might be a reaction that we start to see as more things are automated.
I do feel that way when I go to the local co-op. I do prefer to stand in a queue and have a brief conversation with a human being rather than be, told to scan my card repeatedly until I can, fumble around for my wallet by a machine. It's like a human being watches you, doesn't say, scan your card, scan your card, scan your card, scan your card. Like the computer doesn't know that I've dropped my wallet and I'm fumbling around for it, but a human being can see that. And until they give the robots the intelligence to determine, oh, right, the human's being an idiot and he's dropped his wallet. Oh, no, look, he's got the wrong card out. Like he's given me his library card. But that human element, I relish that human element.
Particularly these days.
Well, yes. Yes. And finally, AI camera operator confuses bald head for football. What?
So this was another AI fail. Well, no, I suppose the previous one wasn't an AI fail, but this one, similar vein. There was a camera, a new camera system being tried by a Scottish football team with ball tracking technology. So the idea is that it can spot the ball on the pitch and it will move the camera around and track it, so the people watching have the best view of the game, which is something again a person would normally do by looking and saying that's a ball and following it. But this has an algorithm which works out where the ball is, except apparently on a sunny day, a shiny bald head bears a striking resemblance in size and shape to a football. And so there's footage of it panning around, finding the ball, and then just going and looking at this guy's head.
So this is the linesman who happens to be at the side of the pitch. Yes. So he's clearly in the shot.
Yeah.
But it zooms right in on him. It's like, yeah, brilliant. And that's all the news for this week. And indeed, that's all for episode 33. Thank you all for listening. Next week, we'll have an exciting discussion segment, a fabulous command line love, and lots of your lovely feedback. Keep that coming to show@ubuntupodcast.org, or you can come and chat to us in our Telegram channel, which you'll find by going to ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram. See you all next time.